Hi, welcome to Stories from My Drinking Days. My name's Harry Fell and I'm the owner of Nolo Cocktails and Bars. Joining us today is Denise Hamilton Mace from Nolo Drinker magazine. Welcome, Denise.
Hiya.
Thanks for joining us. Hi. So, tell us about your journey with alcohol then. Do you remember having your first drink?
I think I do. So I've got to be honest, I think it's the first one. So I remember that I was probably around about 14 and I was at a party at a friend's house. And I don't necessarily remember the first drink, but I remember the first drinking experience because the night ended with me in her bedroom on the floor, leaning against her bed with other kids in the room, just feeling really woozy, really crappy, and completely out of my control. I just threw up all over her bedroom floor, like social suicide for a teenager.
Yeah.
And my mum had to come and get me, and it was just all sorts of horribleness. So I don't remember the first drink itself, but I remember that experience. And somehow that didn't put me off.
It's amazing how it doesn't, does it, at that age? You know, I think a lot of people I've spoken to, 14 seems to be the age to start drinking, and it hasn't put any of us off taking a journey with the booze. So, how did that then develop? Did you just then become a regular drinker, or what happened next?
I guess it just became it became part of the social circle, right? It became the thing that was around, and it's that rite of passage that we all go through. And can we get a little bit of booze? Who wants a bit of cider? You're cool. You're hanging out in the park. You're having a drink. And for me, I was a very awkward teenager. I chuckle a little bit because I think we all think we were awkward teenagers, right? There's very few people that go like, "Oh no, I was a really cool teenager. Like I was the king of the school." But like all teenagers, I felt a little bit awkward. I felt quite unsure of myself. I didn't feel pretty. I didn't feel popular. I used to flip from one sort of social group to the other because one group would stop talking to you. You know what girls can be like in school. And then there was another group of kids that I used to like hanging out with because they like to listen to different kinds of music. And so I never really knew who I was. And so I found that when I was having a drink, it didn't matter because I could just be this social butterfly, and I was funnier and I was cooler. And, obviously that was all in my head, but I felt funnier and I felt cooler, and I felt like it didn't matter so much. So it just became something that I went to without consciously realizing why I was using it. I mean, this is all with the benefit of hindsight. And then as I grew up, alcohol became very much a large part of my life as I started to want to work. I've always been independent. I've always wanted to work. I was allowed to get sort of a Saturday girl job in a shop that people of my generation might remember called Etam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you remember Etam?
Yeah, I remember Etam.
And I had a little bit of pocket money in there, and I was like, no, I want to earn more money. I want to have my own money. I want to be independent. So when it came time to go to uni, I decided not to go, and that I want to go straight into the workforce. But I had no idea what I was going to do because I had spent so much of my teenage years just drinking and socializing that I hadn't put any thought into what I was going to do next. And I fell into bar work, and I realized I was really good at it. To me, it was easy. It wasn't like work. I started off collecting glasses and wiping tables, and I got to be in pubs and to socialize and to chat to people all the time. And, everyone wants to talk to you when you're working in the pub. So I was like, okay, this is my place. I found my happy place. And so from then on, alcohol just became synonymous with who I was and with what I did.
Yeah. And did you find that you started drinking more than working in the bar and the pub, or was it you didn't drink when you were at work, but you'd have one afterwards, or?
Oh, no.
How did that affect your drinking?
Hospitality is, there are a few professions where they say that, alcohol abuse is rife, and hospitality is right at the top of the list for obvious reasons. It's just there. It's there everywhere. And it is how you you signify everything when it comes to working in hospitality. So I went on to have a 24-year career in bars and restaurants. I've worked in clubs, race courses, I've put on events, and alcohol becomes the marker for everything, whether it's what you're serving people and how you're trying to get people to have a good time, or whether it's how you're being rewarded by your boss for doing a good shift, whether it's how you're commiserating with your team because things were really stressful. It doesn't matter what it is. In hospitality, booze is the marker for everything that you do. And as I moved through through my career, and as I progressed and became more managerial and I had more power and more control, I could do more things. I could drink as I wanted to. You know, it was my stock. I was ultimately responsible for it. So if I was having a bad day and I wanted to just sit and, you know, knock off a bottle of wine, then I could go ahead and do that and make sure that it would not affect sort of the stock take and how we manage things. It was just the marker for everything you do in hospitality is drinking. And it becomes just normal. You know, it's very, very much just a normal part of things. For us, we always used to say, we don't have weekends, you know, because everyone would be like, oh, yeah, you're happy it's Friday, Saturday's like, no, that means I've got to work harder. But so we say,
it's a busy time.
Yeah. So we say we don't have weekends, we have late nights, because our weekends would start whenever the shift was finished. It doesn't matter whether it's a Friday night or a Tuesday night, you know, because there's always another bar you can go to, and bartenders know other bartenders, managers know other managers. You can always get somewhere. You can always keep partying. So, yeah, it was rife.
Yeah. And so your career in hospitality, was that all in London?
Yeah. I'm a London girl, born and bred.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's quite different. So I run a hotel in the Forest of Dean, and so some of what you say just completely resonates with rewarding people at the end of a shift with a drink. We do that. If we've had a busy shift, we've had a hard shift, everyone gets a drink from the bar. Yeah. Now, because of where we are, not everybody takes alcohol because they might have to drive. And I think people are becoming a little bit more conscious of what they're drinking. But, that really resonated. But obviously, in London, you know, it is a 24/7 sort of night life. Whereas where we are, when we shut, there's not much that's still open. So you can't keep going. So did you ever feel that you had a problem with alcohol then?
I have at various points in my life thought to myself that I am using alcohol in a negative way. But not recently. Funnily enough, my decision to remove the majority of alcohol from my life has never been because of a rock bottom moment or being in recovery. And we can talk about that if you want to. But for me, it was, I have in the past knowingly been using alcohol as a sticking plaster, as a Band-Aid, as emotional support. And I've known that I've been doing it. And there have been times when I've said to myself, you need to stop drinking, stop partying, because obviously with hospitality in central London, drinking doesn't come alone. Drinking comes with drugs and it comes with a whole lifestyle. But none of that has ever made me go, all right, that's it, stop, I'm going to go teetotal now. For me, it's always been just a sort of like a cycle of you're doing this too much, this is not healthy, there is an issue going on here, you need to sort yourself out. Okay, let's pull back a bit, let's take a little bit of a break, let's not go out so much. Feeling better? Okay, great, let's get back on it and let's keep partying. So it's been that sort of hamster wheel of socializing with this lubricant that just is ever present. Yeah,
it sounds like that you've been quite mindful about it and you've recognised when there's been an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've recognised it. There've been, I think, 2 points in my life that I could probably think back to say that I've recognised it. Whether I did enough about it, obviously not. But I think that's it, isn't it? It's one thing being aware of something, and it's another thing taking action that you know is going to... Because it's hard to step away, particularly as alcohol was such a big part of my life. Not just socially, but economically as well, because it was my job. There are very few people, as I'm sure you'll know, who work in hospitality who don't drink, because it's very hard to recommend wine to somebody if you've never tasted it. It's very hard to be part of that social group and to feel like you fit in if you're not drinking. So having recognized it and having done something about it have always been two different things for me. I did once, at one stage, I took my first dry January, or my only dry January, which was probably it's about 6 years ago now. And I took the month off and I used it as an excuse to give myself a break. And then I actually went on and did another 2 months. And I was like, this feels good. And I felt fantastic. And to this day, I don't know why I decided to get back into my old habits, because it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's really easy though, isn't it, to get back into old habits? I mean, I've done dry January a few times and just gone straight back onto it, 1st of February. And I've almost been one of those people that's been counting down the days. Oh, it's only 3 more days and I can have a drink. And then 5 years ago, it's almost exactly 5 years ago, I completely gave up drinking. Initially, I was only going to do a month. I just wanted to give my liver a break. So, yeah, it's funny. I think your story is really, really similar to mine, that there was no rock bottom that made me decide that was going to be it with alcohol. So I'm really interested, what came first, giving up working in hospitality or changing your relationship with alcohol?
Well, it was a kind of tandem, but not through my own design. So in 2020, I was on furlough whilst also being on maternity leave with my second child. And I was having conversations with my boss and he kept going, don't worry, everything's fine. You're coming back. Your job is safe. And I was like, okay, all right, if you're sure. And then at 4:00 on a Friday, I got a WhatsApp message telling me that HR would be in touch in the morning. Luckily, I had a good relationship with our HR person and she was like, yeah, we're going to be making you redundant. So I never went back to working in hospitality after during COVID, because I was on maternity leave. I then, at that point, had my new baby, my daughter, and my son, who was 2 years old at the time. And I was thinking about what I was going to do next. And the very thought of going back into hospitality just filled me with dread. I was like, I can't go back into... But at that point, I was working in events, and I was doing events and sales, and I was the head of the department. I was like, I cannot go back into this whole hospitality arena, meet new people, work late nights, have to socialize, have to taste drinks, have to do tastings and meetings and all this sort of thing with 2 babies at home. And I can't go back into it. And so I took some time out and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I was really interested in fitness, health and fitness. So I decided to start studying with the Open University, doing a degree in sports fitness and coaching. And as a part of that, I started looking at nutrition and realizing that the things that I was putting in my body were really impacting me. And I discovered that red meat made me really moody. So I cut red meat out. And then I was like, okay, but there's still other things affecting me. And I realized that alcohol was having a really big impact on my week after I'd had a few drinks. And so for me, it was more of a slow realization that, yes, we know that hangovers are bad and that alcohol is not good for you. But I hadn't realized the impact it was having, like long-term, well, short-term, long-term, in that if I have a drink on Tuesday night, that yes, on Wednesday I might have a hangover, but on Friday I'll still be in a mood because the alcohol's still in my system and affecting how I'm feeling. And so it was that realization that made me go, I don't really want to be doing this anymore. And that's how it all sort of snowballed for me. And that's what led to me launching the magazine, because I realized that having something that was having such a long-lasting impact on me for such a long time without me realizing it meant that I'd been operating at like 60% of my capacity in my relationships, in my parenting, in my working, in everything that I was doing. And I just hadn't had any idea. I just thought, it's a hangover. Once the hangover's gone, I'm back to being me. And now I realize that it has a much further reaching impact. And so that's why I say it was kind of in tandem. It was a realization that I didn't want to go back into hospitality. And one of the reasons I didn't want to go back into hospitality is because I didn't want to drink. And I don't think that in the kind of hospitality that I worked in, it would be possible to go back into it without being part of that sort of lifestyle.
Yeah. And so now that you've given up alcohol, then have you found that everything's improved? So you said you were working at 60% sort of in your parenting. Have you found that that's improved?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, my kids still drive me crazy. Don't get me wrong. They're still a pain in the ass. I mean, whose kids aren't?
Yeah.
And my husband, don't get me started. But I am now so much more aware of when I am feeling negative or when I am not operating at my best, whether that's work related or whether it's parenting or whether it's with my husband or my friends or whatever it is that I'm doing. I have so much more self-awareness now than I ever did in the last 24 years of my hospitality career. I know myself so much better, which is something that I'd always wanted and has always been missing, is just to know who I am and how I feel about things. And it's given me so much confidence in my ability to make choices and to take action that I truly think is the best. I spent years in this hospitality career living by the mantra, fake it till you make it. And I now hate that phrase. I hate it with a passion.
Yeah.
Because I just feel that when you are living a fake it till you make it life, you're not living your true self. You're not being who you really are. And you're not giving yourself a chance to grow and develop and to put your hands up and say, I don't know what that means, or I don't know how to do that, or I don't understand this. And now I have the confidence when I'm interviewing somebody, for example, for my podcast, if they start talking about a technique that they use for processing their drinks, and I'm like, I'm happy to go, I don't understand a word you just said. Can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
You know, and that feels really good. So, yeah, I'm definitely far more self-aware, and that's a real positive change in my life. I think that's the biggest positive change in my life that cutting back or removing alcohol has given me.
Yeah. I also think for me, it's just growing older as well. You suddenly realise a bit more who you are, and all of those insecurities you had when you were younger that led you to alcohol in the first place, or at least led me to alcohol, aren't so prevalent. Yeah. And so it's easier to be yourself, really. Yeah. So, sports and nutrition degree, is that all finished now? Have you completed your open university? No, it's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing. I actually had to, so I did 2 years and I really loved it. I really absolutely loved it. But doing the magazine is a full-time job. Well, it's about 2 full-time jobs. And I had to make a decision before I was going into my 3rd year that there's only so many hours in the day. So I'm taking a step back. So the great thing about the Open University is that you have a really long time to finish your degree. So I'm taking a step back, concentrating on the magazine and the podcast and all the elements of Low No Drinker. And then once I'm able to build enough of a team to keep things ticking along, then I'm definitely going to go back to it. I don't necessarily want to do anything with it. It's just for my own personal education, because it's an area that really interests me. And it's nice. I never went to university, as I said, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it's nice to be studying something at a degree level because I want to, rather than, trying to think about what job I'm going to get when I'm a grown-up.
Yeah. So tell us about the magazine. What prompted you to start it, and when did the journey begin?
So, Low No Drinker magazine, now I started that just over a year ago. We just released our 1-year anniversary issue. So what prompted me to start it was, as I said, I realised that I didn't want to keep drinking the way that I was. And I wanted to, but I like drinks, right? I like going to the pub. I like having a beer or a glass of wine. And I didn't want to stop doing that. So I started looking around at what other drinks I could have. And I found it was really difficult to find information about drinking less or having alcohol-free drinks that didn't also come with a barrage of negativity around alcohol. Everything seemed to be coupled with the evils of alcohol and the demonization of alcohol and telling me all the medical fears about it and all the horrible things. And I'm a woman in my 40s. I know that alcohol is bad. I know the negatives of it. I don't need to be constantly reminded that the choices that I've made in the past have led me to where I am now, and that alcohol gives you 7 types of cancer. I don't need to be told it all the time. And I couldn't find anything that just celebrated low and no alcohol drinks with no agenda, with no judgment. And so, like a lot of founders that I speak to, it was a case of creating a solution for something that I wanted, because I couldn't find it, so I thought I'd make it myself. And so the point to the magazine to me has always been creating a judgment-free zone where people can come and find out about the drinks that can help them live a life less intoxicated without all of the extras that go along with it. It's a real focus on the drinks industry, and that's what separates it from other publications that may be out there. It's really about letting people know that these are the drinks that exist, this is how they're made, these are the founders who are producing them, this is the passion that they have. But that's also coupled with lifestyle pieces that are really celebrating people's journeys and their experiences. There's some humor in there. You know, I have people like Michael Sargood, who people might know as at Happy Without the Hooch, who in the last issue wrote this fantastic piece about him stepping outside of his comfort zone, doing some stand-up comedy for the first time. The next one, I think he may be writing either about his colonic irrigation, which he talks a lot about on Instagram, or his attempt to run a half marathon. So, you know, there's lots of humour in there. We've got an agony aunt, dear Auntie Shell, who is trained in recovery. So she's our new agony aunt, and she answers questions that people have. I have interviews in there with brand founders. I have regular spirits reviews. So the Emma Newman writes a review on a sector of spirits every time. Last time she did alcohol-free tequilas. Martin Dixon reviews alcohol-free beers. So it's really a wealth of information about the people, places and brands who are leading the low and no alcohol revolution, as I like to call it, because I think we are living in this revolution, and it's really exciting. It does cover both alcohol-free and low alcohol and lower alcohol, because for me it's worth recognizing that the vast majority of people who buy low and no alcohol drinks are still imbibing full-strength alcohol. And those are the people that I think we would need to reach more so than anybody else. Those who are already in recovery or who've already removed alcohol from their life completely are far more aware of what options there are out to them. But I want to reach people who are like me a few years ago, who didn't know that there were other choices, who only saw the full-strength alcohol, and who didn't know that if they didn't feel like drinking but still wanted to be part of the party, they could have this amazing alcohol-free beer or this amazing mid-strength gin, so that they could have a G&T but still get up in the morning and go to work. So it really runs a gamut of the whole low, no, and lower spectrum to give people a wealth of information.
Yeah, excellent. So how long did it take you to take it from an idea of this is what you were going to do to publishing your first ever magazine?
So it was actually pretty fast. Well, so I think it was pretty fast. I think it was about a couple of months, because I had the idea. I had what you call a shower moment idea. And then I kind of sat with it for a bit. And then one morning lying in bed, I was like, I wonder if people would be interested in this. So I sent out a little survey to my tiny Instagram following and a few friends and just said, is this something that you'd be interested in? I asked them a few questions. I got about 30 responses and 28 of them said yes. And I was like, okay, right, I need to do this. And 2 months later, the first issue was out. So it was pretty quick. However,
I think that's pretty quick.
It was pretty quick. It was pretty intense. However, I have met people who I go to things like Imbibe and, you know, which are drinks industry expos. And I have met somebody there, a couple of people who said, oh, I remember you mentioned this idea a year ago and I'm so glad you did it. And I'm like, I don't remember telling you about this. I don't think I had this idea a year ago. And I spoke to somebody else and she said, no, that is, that's, I can't remember the term she used, but she said, that's when you've had an idea that really sits with you and it just pops out of nowhere and then disappears. And then like a year later, it comes back to you and you're like, this is something I need to do, like a fresh idea. So I think it was about 2.5 months, but it may have been a year and 2 months.
We'll go with 2 months.
So it was just a bit of a whirlwind, really. I did a lot of research. I spent a lot of time on YouTube. watching other people's videos, getting some advice, reading lots of articles, and then just sort of throwing it all together and sort of seeing if this is something that I could do. And the first issue came out, and looking back on it now, I'm really, really proud of it, but it was terrible. But that's okay. I beat myself up a lot along the way, going, oh, you know, there's a spelling mistake there, or I didn't line that picture up there, or that's really grainy. But I've since come to learn that that's okay, and that it's better to start messy than to not start at all. And as absolutely. You yourself said earlier on, you know, it's about sort of not letting perfect be the enemy of good enough. So I've sort of tried
absolutely. And I read something once about starting a business that if you don't look back on your first product or whatever it is that you've done and think, oh my God, that was rubbish, then you didn't start early enough. So you started early enough because you're already looking back and saying, oh my God, I've improved so much in a year, which is amazing. So issue 7 has just come out.
Yep.
And I'm guessing that, you know, what's the plan for Low No Drinker magazine going forward? You've obviously got the podcast as well. Have you got any other plans?
Yeah, I've got a million plans, Harry, and that's the problem. I've got so many plans and so many ideas. I need to sort of manage my own expectations. I'm a big fan of managing expectations. So the magazine, first and foremost, is the crux of Low No Drinker, and everything that I do, it's about producing this magazine, and people are loving it. It's really resonating with people. I love the fact that it's a print magazine as well as digital, and it's something that you can hold in your hands. It might be a generational thing, you know, but at 44 years old, magazines to me were always something that you had, that you could sit with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, curl up and read something physical. Although the digital version is great for a lot of people that read it who are outside of the UK. You know, obviously postage gets more expensive. So I'm going to keep producing the magazine. I have a local friend, a mum friend, who helps me with all the editing and collecting articles. So it's really nice now I've got somebody who can be part of this growth with me and help me develop it, because it's getting to the stage now where there's so much going on. There aren't enough hours in the day. So the magazine will continue to grow and flourish. And ultimately, one day, my goal is to see the magazine on the shelves in your WH Smiths or any other newsagents, right next to your Cosmos. And, you know, I figure if there can be a magazine about fishing, then there can be a magazine about low no drinks for those of us that want it. So that's the ultimate goal. The podcast, so I did launch a podcast last year. I took a little break from it, again, to sort of regroup and figure out how to manage my time. And I relaunched it 2 months ago. And I love doing the podcast. So the podcast focuses specifically on the drinks industry, whereas the magazine is more about living a low-no life. The magazine, the podcast focuses on the drinks industry. I interview brand founders. I interview industry experts. All about what's going on in the low-no industry, what's going to impact it, and how it's going to continue to grow. And I love doing that because drinks obviously are my passion. That's where I came from, a drinks background. The last episode that went out, I interviewed a guy called Hamish Renton, who is the MD of a food and drink consultancy. And we were talking about the fat jabs and the impact that fat jabs are going to have on the low-no drinks industry. And so I just find it really fascinating, you know, exploring these different avenues. Yeah. So the podcast and the magazine are the two main branches of Low No Drinker, and they'll continue to grow. I am currently in the throes of wrestling with myself with an idea for writing a book. So that might be something that comes out. But again, I'm trying to be realistic into how much time I've got in the day. As I said, I've got 2 small kids running an entire business from my living room. Your hands full. Yeah. And so I have to sort of temper my excitement and my enthusiasm with what's achievable. But at the same time, I don't want to limit myself, you know, because I think if you limit yourself, you never know what you're going to achieve. So yeah, it's just to continue this growth, to continue to grow within the industry. I've done a few speaking events recently, and I really enjoyed doing those. So I'd love to do some more and to help spread the word. It's lovely seeing sort of light bulbs go off in people's heads when they ask questions about Lono, and they ask why the drinks cost so much, and why they can't find a good red wine, and what's going to be happening next, and to be able to give people answers and to help them understand and appreciate what the founders in this industry are doing is a real gift. So I love doing that.
Yeah, excellent. And obviously your background is in events. Any plans to add events to your portfolio?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, Harry. People have mentioned it. And keep mentioning it to me. So I think it's definitely something that's wanted. Whether I want to go back into events, I don't know. But I definitely think that there is room somewhere for a low-no drinker gathering of sorts at some point in the future. Yeah. But as to how that would look, I don't know. I don't know yet.
Yeah. And maybe you'll let someone else organise it and you can just go and attend.
Yeah.
Probably be more fun.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Yeah. I think you do get to a stage, don't you, if you've worked in hospitality, where some people get to that stage where actually you just don't want to go back and do it. You've kind of, it is all encompassing. It is a way of life. And particularly now you've got young children, it's maybe just not something that's quite as suitable for you now.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard because, I mean, my husband's job isn't very flexible. So I'm the main sort of, I do the school runs and the doctor's appointments and all that sort of stuff. So what I like about working for myself from home is that I have the freedom and the flexibility to do what I need to do when I need to do it. And so going back into that sort of events, hospitality world where you have to consider so many other elements, don't you? And so many other people and there isn't that flexibility. So, but I'm down with the idea of someone else doing all the hard work, and then I just sort of turn up like a star guest and just be like, "Hi, jazz hands. This is what's happening," and then I toddle off again. I like that idea.
Yeah, that sounds like good fun. So, one last question for you. We see all the beautiful drinks behind you. Mm-hmm. What are your personal favourites?
Oh, see, I get this question a lot, and it's really hard. It's really hard because there are so many drinks, and what you can see behind me isn't even half of what's in this house at the moment in terms of what's being sent in. There is some really great stuff. It depends on what sort of area you're looking in. Yesterday I was drinking something called from a brand called Amma Brewery, and they make a sparkling pet nat tea, which is designed for high-end consumption in sort of 5-star Michelin-starred restaurants. And that was a really lovely, lovely drink. The day before, I was drinking the new mojito from Caleño. So they've just made a new ready-to-drink mojito, which is lovely, and it tastes of actual mint. Because quite often when you get sort of pre-made drinks, whether you drink alcohol or not, obviously with all the sugars and preservatives and everything that goes in it, they don't often taste of the freshness that you get. So I really liked that. There's just so many different things. I'm really excited by Luke Hemsley at Wednesday's Domain. He's doing some great stuff now. His red wine's really good. He's just released some sparkling and rosé, which I'm yet to try, so I'm very excited about those. Ferragaya, which you can see up in the top there, distilled in Scotland, in Fife, is a really interesting. It's not like anything else. We did include it in a whiskey roundup because it was the closest thing that people would understand it to be. But it's got a real lovely depth of flavour that lends itself both to drinking just with a bit of ginger ale or mixing into cocktails. And Crossip's smoky, so good, really deep and smoky. So there's loads of stuff out there. Obviously, the beers category is huge, and there are tons and tons of lagers and ales out there to try. There's a brand called Renegade, which my husband and I have been drinking recently, which is just unique. They do a peach, but it's not sickly. Even when you're drinking alcohol, like things like Recorded ciders, they can be really sickly and sweet with artificial fruit flavors. This brand, Renegade, it feels like when you open the can, it feels like they just squeezed a peach into it. It was such a good lager. So yeah, I find it hard to pick a favourite because there's just so many amazing drinks to try.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's so many, and there's so many new ones as well coming onto the market. And I know you've mentioned before in our Sober Business Network about the Wednesday Domain, and I've not tried those, so I definitely need to get my hands on that wine, because wine is probably, for me, the trickiest category, really. It's the one that maybe we haven't seen the best of yet, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely the one category that struggles the most out of all of them, and the winemakers are aware of this, and it's a big challenge because whereas it's not got the highest alcohol content initially, obviously spirits at 40% have more. Spirits have the gift of being masked by what you mix them with. So whether you're having them with a quality tonic or you're putting them into a cocktail, they have that help from the other liquids in them. Whereas wine hasn't got anywhere to hide. It is just that in a glass, and taking 14% of the content away, so 14% alcohol, is having a really big impact. So there's a lot of technology and development going on in the wine industry in terms of whether dealcoholization is the right route, or whether we're fermenting with different processes so that we can still gain those flavors. I think that it will get there eventually, but it's just going to take a bit more time. And it's really important, I think, that consumers continue to support the low-no wine industry, because without their support, these producers can't continue to develop the liquid. So we've got to keep trying them and giving feedback and being honest and telling these producers, actually, this one wasn't quite right, or this didn't quite hit the spot, or I like what you did with that, let's have some more. Because then, as with all of us, right, just like yourself with the hotel, when your guests come and stay, you've got a feedback book, right? What did you like, what didn't you like, and then you can try and make things better. And so we need to support the wine industry, because otherwise we're going to lose it, and that would be a shame, because I think that's one of those moments that we really need to have a good alcohol-free or low alcohol alternative for. And so what's happening is we're getting a lot of mid-range wines are coming into the market now, so a lot in your sort of 5 to 7%, which is great because it's giving people who want to drink less but still want to have some alcohol, it's giving them an option. But a lot is going to go into those, because it's going to be easier to produce something that still has that level of alcohol than it is to produce something without it and still has that body. Alcohol gives such body to wine. So much of the mouthfeel is from the alcohol, that replacing that without loading it with sugars is a real challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I think you're right. We need to support them, and feedback's good, isn't it? Because that is actually how we all improve. And from whether it's your magazine or a bottle of non-alcoholic wine, and there are some nice ones out there, but it definitely feels like it's the sector that's got the most development still to happen. The spirits, I think there's so many great spirits out there, there's so many great beers, but the wine, you've got to be pretty picky at the moment, but hopefully it will improve. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the magazine develops, and also the podcast. And I can't thank you enough for coming on my podcast today. It's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. And I wish you all the best, Denise. We'll put a link to the magazine in the show comments. So if you want to check out Low No Drinker magazine, obviously you can either Google it or just check out the comments. And thank you very much, Denise. This has been Stories from My Drinking Days with me, Harry Fell, and Denise Hamilton Mace. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry.
Thanks. Bye-bye.